I'm involved in, sports ministry. Essentially, the question that we ask ourselves is the following. If sport is the Roman road of culture, how many things in the world today essentially has stayed the same? If you think about it, everything around us is shifting, technology is shifting, but sport like soccer or rugby is still played by a bunch of men running around chasing this bladder filled with air, right? And about 3 billion participate in soccer in some way or another as spectators, a couple of billion in basketball, cricket, 3.75 billion play video games today. So then you ask yourself, right, if this is where people are, then what's the kingdom opportunity? So this is sort of my space. We ask ourselves, how do you see gospel movements in my marketplace, which is sport? And you have a whole continuum in that marketplace, from the spectator, the soccer mom, rugby mom, whatever they do, and then you move up to those that are involved in sport for recreational reasons, social reasons, maybe health reasons. You have those that are picking up a new sport. There are always new sports sweeping the world. Right now, a lot of people are talking about this thing called pickleball. Have you heard of it? Dodgeball, ultimate frisbee, 8,000 sports in the world. So how do you reach the people that love these 8,000 sports? And so what the MC kindly pointed out is I have the privilege of leading a leadership school. And think of it as a funnel or a user journey. So we train 100,000 people in sports ministry every year. And then they funnel into one of the 70 schools that we run around every single time zone for 900 leaders, 70 schools that go for a month. And then we handpick the best 24 to 28 and we bring them to Stellenbosch for 3 months. And so 20 years ago, that is how I discovered this place called South Africa. My church said, leave your corporate job. I was working in tech with a law degree. My church said, give all of that up and come and do sports ministry full time. So I resigned from my job, after a lot of searching and God speaking very clearly. And then I came to South Africa exactly 20 years ago. I stayed in this campsite, freezing cold, because Malaysia only has two what do you call it? Seasons, yeah. Rain and no rain, okay? So it's 35 Celsius every single day on the equator. So I came here and God really blew my mind and my heart, and your nation had a huge part to play with that. 16 years ago, we came back, my wife and I came back, newly married, about 3 years, and we moved to Stellenbosch to be involved in the World Cup of 2010, soccer World Cup. And the question that the South African church had at that point in time was, why? Why would God entrust the soccer World Cup to Africa? And the church leaders were very wise. They said, if we want to answer that question, we must try and discover what is in God's heart. And we know, and what is the crisis on this continent? And so the crisis, simply put, is there is a fatherless generation. So how do you restore fathers to the fatherless? And then, ka-ching, it's like, okay, let's train the coach to be the father on the sports field if the biological father is absent. And let's help the coach be the father to the fatherless. And that's why God gave the World Cup to Africa. And from that, I learned a lot of lessons, of which I'll share a few things. But essentially, how do you release leaders into what God has called them to do? So so I've got really the joy of being part of this crazy sport ministry thing, where we have got engagement we've divided the world into 12 regions. We've divided there are 253 territories in the world. Territories means autonomous, semi-autonomous. So we don't debate whether Taiwan or Tibet belongs to that big country. We don't play politics, and that's why the list is 253. And so we have sport ministry disciple making in 238 of them. And we're tracking 5,300 cities, over 100,000 people, and there's sports ministry in 3,300 of them. So what I share with you tonight comes from a ton of mistakes, okay? Because when you try to work cross-culturally, right now, in that campsite, I'm leading a group of 28 from 25 countries. And it's super fun. Because you don't know what you don't know until you come. The first African I ever saw in my whole life was 20 years ago when I walked into that campsite. And you don't know what you don't know. So this kind of gathering is super fun because it's so diverse, and you don't know what you don't know until you're with people who really love the Lord and want to see this nation transform. And I'm always inspired by Trigger, always, because of the stuff you guys do. But at the very same time, I want to warn you that this weekend will create a lot of cognitive and spiritual dissonance in you. That means you will struggle. Good luck if you paid a lot to be here. All right, and let me start with the following. When we speak about leadership, we think of the following analogy. Think about a guy, a captain of a ship, a sailing ship, and he's got a crew, okay? And so when we speak about leadership, at the topic tonight, if you didn't know, is redemptive leadership. When we think about leadership, we think about the captain, so self-leadership. Then we think about the crew, that is team leadership. And then we think about the boat. Some of us do, not all of us, but I think for most of you, that is something that would occupy you. And that would be the legal entity or the organization. All right? And then you think, and then we also think about, which is, not much is written on this, because a lot of the attention is given to maybe the captain, probably the team, definitely a lot, MBAs would be about the ship. But very little is done about what is outside the ship, which is the currents and the tides, and the ebb and the flow, how the wind is blowing, etc., etc. So when you think about the captain, you think about, all right, what do you think about? Vision, communication, you think about, values, stuff like that, right? Then when you think about the team, what do you think about? Conflict handling, you think about teamwork, cohesion, resonance, synchronicity, and all those kind of nice words. Then when you look at the ship, human resources, financial management, what do you call that? Stakeholder management, you think about, capitalization, runways, and all that stuff. Then when you think about outside the ship, that's where we may struggle, okay? So in the corporate world, you hear these words like strategic foresight, futures thinking, okay? Megatrends, scenario planning. Why? How do you see beyond the first and second horizon? How do you go to the third horizon, McKinsey? But as believers, we also have this term, hopefully that will be unpacked somewhere in this weekend. The term would be prophetic imagination or prophetic insight. Like, what is God doing? What is the trajectory of a nation or a city or your industry? What is God's heart for that? Do you know? Okay? So that's the stuff outside the ship. And the problem is, you can be really good as a captain, mechanics, the skills, the knowledge. You can be great even at, managing your team and rah, and all that stuff and do nice activities as a team. You can be really good at running a tight ship, But if you don't know where the wind is blowing as a sail ship, you're in big trouble. There's a book written by a guy called Roger Parrott. I think it's called The Long View. And he says, look, you can either try to get to where you need to be as a powerboat or as a sailboat. Okay? Unfortunately, as a powerboat, it's going to take quite a lot of resources. But if the Holy Spirit is pneuma and we are following His prompting and His leading, then sometimes it doesn't look like you're getting anywhere. But you're being led by the Spirit. And is that a win? Well, depends on who defines a win. Okay, so I'm going to spend the remainder of my time just unpacking this concept. And I want you to do me a favor. I want you to take off your shoes as we start. I'm serious. I'm not joking. Serious. I am serious. Take off your shoes. If you dare, take off your socks. Okay? I want the guys to take off their socks. The girls might have stockings that go up to here. So, okay, don't worry about that. But the guys, take off your socks if you can. Shoes and socks. All right. Hey, who promised you that trigger will be comfortable? Okay. So, we always speak about, not always, well, yes, we spend a lot of time. So if you ask me, what do you do in sports ministry? What do you train your people in? And we always say, the first thing we train everyone in is to die. Okay? There is this thing called pride. The root is pride. You cannot see pride. You can see the effects of pride. So the effects of pride, now you might think, oh, what has this got to do with me? I just sang this amazing worship song with my hand lifted up. Did you not see? I don't have pride. Well, if your hand was lifted up and you were looking to see who looked at you, then, okay, maybe that's a problem then. Pride. When you walk into a space like this, when you interact with your clients, when you interact with your staff, when you interact with your investors, do you approach them with any of this? Skepticism. You take credit. This was my idea. This is my dream. You use a lot of I and me and my. You're not teachable. And, investors would say, all right, I look at people who are teachable. And they would say, and I listen, be careful of that one, that one, that one. They're not teachable. You approach everyone with doubt. Can I trust him? Can I not? That's your default. And there are reasons for this, okay? You compare, how much did that guy make last year? How much did they raise? What's their head count? How many offices do they have? How nice is it? What's the postcode? Is it here or is it there? You're oblivious to your own sin, to your own flaws. You never ask anyone to give you feedback. You don't have mentors. You're not accountable. You're not broken. Pretty envious, impatient. You gossip. You're irritated easily. If that is something you see in yourself, or you know this, or your wife or your children don't want to be around you because they know they might poke the bear and the bear is going to bite them. People don't tell you the truth because they know you don't like it. Talk about others and their failures. Maybe you revel in their failure. You're impatient, you're unforgiving, ungrateful. Taking off your shoes. You're self-conscious. Maybe there's a hole in your sock. Maybe you didn't clip your toenails. Or you know, I want you to show your foot to the person next to you. And I'm Asian, I know this can be quite offensive, but it's an object lesson. So, what then is the antidote? What then is the antidote? Okay? And the Bible has many, many, many passages that you can read for yourself. I hope we'll get through a few tonight. Philippians 2 is obviously, if you're taking notes, Philippians chapter 2, verse 1 to 11. Reading 1 John chapter 4, that is essential because it talks about fear and love. And how do you recognize the two? If you read Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount, that is extremely powerful. Luke chapter 17, where Jesus talks about what it's like to be a servant, what it means to follow him. Okay, and you can find a lot of these passages. If you want a book to help you dig into this, there's a book called The Calvary Road, which is even open source today. That doesn't cost any money. You can just download it. It's Creative Commons or open source today. Roy Hession. But you can't see humility just like you can't see pride. But what we can see are the fruits of it. And so what has this got to do with leadership? I think it has everything to do with leadership. Because if one defines leadership as inspirational, charismatic, high-powered, articulate, great fundraiser, or well-respected, captain of the industry, if that's how you define leadership, then the stuff here is a bit dissonant. But if one defines leadership as being selfless, being sacrificial, to love unconditionally, to be like Jesus, then it's completely different. So, this is a tough thing. Because do you really want to be like Jesus? Not the cognitive answer, not the right Sunday school answer, not Jesus is the answer, okay? But like seriously, do you want to follow Jesus and be like him and obey his instructions? Because if the answer is yes, it can be quite difficult. It means maybe that you got to confront your performance-based identity. You got to deal daily with your sense of invincibility, especially if you're successful in your enterprise. You got to look at greed. You got to look at how much profit is acceptable. Like what kind of profit margins are you allowed to charge? If you're a CEO and you earn R1 million and you give 100,000, you're seen as a philanthropist. But if you are working for a non-profit company, you earn 50,000 rand, then you're 50,000 a month, you're a shark. Like why are there different standards for two CEOs, one in the non-profit, one in the for-profit? Are you very laissez-faire with risk? It's not my money anyway. Who cares about the burn rate? Do you only have one bottom line? Profit? Are you and why do people do this? Well, sin, obviously. But in our journey as a sport ministry movement, there are many reasons, but we think one of the biggest reasons has to do with insecurities. Because sometimes you don't just look at what people run to, you also look at what they run away from. And we're all running away from something because all of us had imperfect parents or no parents. Therefore, we all are traumatized in some way. We all have insecurities in some way, shape, or form. So the quicker you acknowledge that you have them, the quicker you can probably get towards some form of healing with Jesus the healer. So what are some signs of insecurity? See if you can recognize them in yourself. You want to prove yourself. You self-justify. You find security in material possessions or intellectual positions like degrees and where your degree is conferred from. You are a people pleaser. You have indulgences or addictions, shopping, collecting expensive things, holidays, pictures of holidays that you post online. You are paternalistic, autocratic, lots of self-pity, victim mentality. You cannot deal with discipline or critique. You seek insatiably for recognition under a whole basket of things called the orphan spirit instead of being a son of the living God. Jealousy, racism, floating around. These could all be indicators of some kind of insecurity. Supporting the underdog, maybe. So what do you do? What do you do? Look, you will be introduced to 3 terms that trigger. When will you do this? Corruption, ethical. Do you use the word corruption? Corrupted. Exploitation, 3 E's, exploitation, ethical, and redemptive. Okay? For sports people, evil, bad, good, kingdom. Because good and kingdom are not the same. Ethical and redemptive are not the same. So go read Matthew chapter 5. Bad? Okay, I don't think anyone here is bad. I mean, theologically, yes. Sinful, wretched, bad. Going to hell. But here, Pharisees, do the right thing. Do the right thing. And Jesus says, not good enough. You look at a woman lustfully, you look at the other person, Series A funding lustfully, sin, go to hell. Matthew 7. Not good enough. You can do all the right things. You can say, Lord, Lord, didn't I do this in your name? I think verse 29. No, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. I don't recognize you. Go to hell. Here, the standards are beyond anything that we can humanly accomplish. No self-will, no self-discipline. We cannot save ourselves. So I want you to say to your friend now as we conclude, you are the problem of South Africa. Say to them, I'm serious, no joke. Theologically, I'm right. Theologically, I'm right. You are the problem of South Africa. Yeah? Doesn't matter whether you're black or white. Why? Why? Because we operate out of here or here. And what we need to do is surrender so we can be here. Because the work of redemptive enterprise, redemptive ministry, redemptive leadership, just adding that that prefix, redemptive, doesn't mean anything until we surrender. And we posture ourselves before a living God so that He can bring the change. And may God give you the courage to obey so that your enterprise is led operated differently. And that's why I sometimes have big question marks in my head when I hear Christian entrepreneurs looking to exit. Because if God gave you, for an exit event, because if God gave you that dream to bring some redemptive change in a nation, why would you sell it to the highest bidder? Why? If really your motive was to change this nation. Okay, my friends, let me close in prayer. Lord, please heal these guys of the trauma of these 30 minutes. And may they be led by you. And I pray that whatever is from you will stick, and whatever is not will be cast out. In the name of Jesus. Amen.